Verse 23, Jesus answered and said, "He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me." Now John's gospel adds that Jesus dipped his bread into the dish and then handed the bread to Judas. Now this is a significant act on the part of Jesus. By doing this, by handing the bread to Judas at the table, Jesus was honoring Judas. In that ancient culture, the host of the meal would give a piece of bread dipped in a sauce like hummus or olive oil to the guest of honor at the meal. It was a way of recognizing the guest of honor. Many cultures are still like that today, where you go, in some cultures, you go to someone's house for a meal, and if you're the guest of honor, they bring out the first portion to you, or they give you something additional as a way of expressing that you are the guest of honor at this meal. Jesus does that here. By handing him the bread, he is saying that Judas is my guest of honor at this meal. Now think about this. Jesus knows that Judas is embezzling money from the ministry. He knows that Judas was planning to betray him that night and deliver him into the hands of the religious leaders to be crucified, but Jesus treats him as the guest of honor at the Last Supper. Later that night, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Judas shows up with the soldiers to arrest Jesus, look down at verse 50. Down at verse 50. Look at what Jesus says to Judas when Judas shows up in the Garden of Gethsemane with all these soldiers. Jesus says to Judas, "Friend, friend, why have you come?" Jesus doesn't say, "You son of perdition." Friend. The other Gospels tell us that when Judas sees Jesus, he kisses him on the cheek, and Jesus says to Judas, "Do you betray me with a kiss?" Because you would embrace someone with a kiss, that you would embrace someone that you love. So are you going to betray me with a kiss? You're saying that you love me while you're betraying me? Here he says, "Friend, friend, why have you come?" At the dinner, he treats Judas as the guest of honor. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." And when we consider how Jesus treated Judas, he's demonstrating love. Love for his enemy. He's doing good to those who are betraying him. That's what it looks like, to love your enemy. He goes on in verse 24 to say, "The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him." What is going to happen to me is just as what is written about me. Isaiah 53 comes to mind. "He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born at all. That's a very sobering verse. Judas ended up in hell. And Jesus says it is better to never exist than to exist and end up in hell. And hell is a real place. It's as real as heaven. And hell is so awful that Jesus says it's better to have never existed at all than to end up in hell. So then Judas, who was betraying him, who was in the act of betraying him, answered and said, "Rabbi, is it I?" He doesn't say, "Lord, is it I?" "Rabbi, is it I?" And Jesus said to him, "You have said it." That's a way of saying, yes, it is. Now, John's gospel tells us that at this point, the devil entered Judas, and Judas was possessed by the devil, and he's devil-controlled. And Jesus said to him, "What you do, do quickly." And then Judas got up and he left the dinner. What you do, do quickly. So what did Judas go to do? Well, it's not recorded for us in the Gospels, but under Roman law, Judas would need to appear before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, to accuse Jesus of a crime so that Pilate would send soldiers to arrest Jesus. That's what the religious leaders paid Judas 30 pieces of silver to do. And when Jesus is in Gethsemane, later in the chapter, Judas will come with a detachment of Roman troops and the temple guard to arrest Jesus, which tells us at some point here, he goes to Pontius Pilate. He makes this formal accusation of a crime against Jesus, and Pilate then sends the Roman troops, and the chief priests send the temple guard now to arrest Jesus in Gethsemane. At this point, though, Judas leaves the dinner, and once Judas left the dinner, Jesus institutes the Lord's Supper, or what we call communion. Judas wasn't present for this part of the dinner. The Lord's Supper is for believers. It's not for unbelievers. It's for people who've put their faith in Jesus Christ for salvation. Look at verse 26. It says, as they were eating, remember, this is a Passover meal. And Jesus will take the Passover meal and transform its meaning. No longer will it commemorate God delivering Israel from physical bondage in Egypt. From this night forward, it will represent God delivering mankind from spiritual bondage to sin through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, he blessed and broke it, and he gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Now, obviously, Jesus doesn't mean the bread was literally his body or that the wine was literally his blood. The disciples present that night did not take Jesus literally when he said, "This is my body and this is my blood." The bread didn't turn into his actual body. The wine didn't turn into his actual blood. You don't derive that from just the plain reading of the passage. Jesus is speaking symbolically.